Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
CNC Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, CNC provides patient-centered care for your entire family. CNC Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Welcome back to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams live from our Pontchartrain Production Studios. Saints, LSU, Tulane Pelicans. We'll touch on college basketball as well, so a lot to talk about, and one of the best we have in the city, the always dapper award-winning journalist and, of course, accomplished author, Les East, joins us on the program. Les, I love the ensemble as always.
The Mardi Gras accoutrement,
yes,
I believe is the term.
Well, I'm glad you said it.
Sort of. I think I butchered it.
No, I think you did all right. But welcome back. Before we get started, tell the folks about your book, how folks can get that, and of course what you're involved in terms of your writing.
Thanks, Eric. The book is called Donkeys, Elephants, and Giraffes. It's a political novel, and but it also has sports undertones throughout. And it's available on all the major online platforms, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, etc. I'm covering LSU and Mississippi State for Saturday Down South. In fact, we'll have some LSU baseball coverage coming up because there's so much excitement about everybody's picking LSU #1 in the country.
Yes.
In baseball, and Media Day, I believe, is next week. And in fact, there's going to be a big baseball version of the Quarterback Club next Tuesday at noon at the Cannery. So we'll have most of the area baseball coaches there. So baseball's already here. It's hard to believe, but we'll be having some LSU baseball coverage at Saturday Down South. And, of course, CrescentCitySports.com. I cover a little bit of everything. Yes. Getting really heavy into the Pelicans now that the Saints have entered the off season, but there's gonna be a lot of Saints stuff yet to come during the off season as well. And I went to Tulane the other night also for that big game.
Well, we're going to get into that as well. But that was such a great crowd over at Delvin on Wednesday night. So we'll talk more about that as we get into the program. And let me just say this, folks. Really great read, the book. So give it a try if you haven't already. Saints finished the season 7-10. They're a little bit behind the rest of the league right now in terms of evaluation. Mickey Loomis met the media last Friday. Normally does that during Senior Bowl. Next week is Senior Bowl. Most of the teams will have their assistant coaches in place for that to be able to be there, hands-on, looking at all the seniors that are coming out. The Saints relieved Dan Roush of his duties today. Again, no word on anybody else within the staff that may be demoted, elevated, moved somewhere else, or let go But again, you figure that's got to happen this week with the Senior Bowl next week.
You would think so. That would be the ideal situation. You know, Dennis Allen, when he spoke the day after the Carolina game, made it sound like they were going to start the evaluations immediately. Mickey said it was going to be this week. So, but still, now we're 4 days into the week, so they should be pretty far along in their evaluation. So I would think if other shoes are going to drop, and we think probably they will, that would happen very quickly. Now with the code DCs, of course, they're working on other teams' timetables there because they're both getting interviews elsewhere. I believe Ryan Nielsen is in Atlanta and Chris Richard is in Carolina. So, you know, we'll see what happens there. I would expect one, if not both of those guys to get an offer. And so the Saints will have to move quickly, but I would think Dennis Allen already has in the back of his mind what he wants to do if something opens up, because this is not surprising.
Let's take those two first. I am of the opinion, I'm going on the record saying that Dennis Allen, after this year, should concentrate on being the head coach and should give the play calling duties to one of the co-coordinators. I think Ryan Nielsen should be the guy. We know, again, he's an up-and-coming coach. He's coveted. He's not going to be picked, going to end up in Atlanta. He's probably going to end up with Sean Payton if he gets a job. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the show. But, again, let him concentrate on head coach. You know, maybe down the line he has the ability to do both. But I think that, again, the team as a whole suffered last year because he had split duties in terms of, again, on game day. Look, he still has veto power like any other head coach in the headset. If again, he doesn't like a call or wants to go in a different direction, I'm sure he could be involved in the game planning if he wanted to. But I think on game day, he has to concentrate on being the head coach. And even across the board, the head coach. And, again, pick one of these defensive coordinators and give them the title so that would, again, protect them from going to another team. I'm in favor of, again, as I mentioned, Ryan Nielsen, but some people may be in favor of Chris Richard, who's got experience. What's your take on that? Because it looks like one or both will be gone if they don't do something to protect them. And the only thing you can do is give them the title of defensive coordinator and allow them to call the plays.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense to free Dennis Allen up. And if they did turn over the play calling duties, Dennis would still be involved in the game planning. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And it would be good to have someone he's worked with who he trusts to take on that role. So it makes a lot of sense. It gets a little tricky with the defensive coordinator thing. It would be helpful if one of those teams would hire one of them right away, and then they could promote the other one and block him from leaving. But right now, they're both co-defensive coordinators, so there's nothing they can do to block them unless they give one the duties, the play calling duties and the title, and you don't want to slight the other one while he's still on your staff. So the timing is really tricky there. But I think either one of those guys would be good. They're both going to be defensive coordinators in the NFL, if not next season, very soon. And they'll both be very successful. So it would be ideal for the Saints if they could hang on to one of them as the defensive coordinator. If the other one gets an opportunity, that would be great for him as well. But if they lose both of them, then you got to go outside, presumably, although I think Hodges, the linebackers coach, is an outstanding young coach and will be a coordinator someday.
You have to protect him. That was going to be my next question. To me, when you look at the up-and-coming assistants on the staff, he is one that you have to protect. Okay, whatever you got to do to keep him title, money, whatever it is, you don't let good coaches out the door.
Right, and so I think he would be a logical candidate. Michael Hodges, the linebacker coach. If they lost both the other guys, he would be a logical candidate to promote from within. I've interviewed him a couple of times. He's a very impressive guy. But the more impressive thing to me is the linebackers just gush about him. They all speak very highly of him. They volunteer what their thoughts about him and what a good coach he is. So it's good that they have that option to go to if it gets to that point. But you're right, they have to make sure he stays on the staff in one capacity or another.
When you look at Ryan Nielsen, he's thought to be one of the young and up-and-coming great defensive line coaches. We didn't see that this year because of, again, they were porous up the middle. Some of that is injuries. Some of that is, again, the loss of some really good players over the last few years. When you look at some of the players, Malcolm Brown gone, Sheldon Rankin's gone. We go through the list of guys that are starting on other teams right now. Yeah. And of course, the Saints, put a feeler out and rolled the dice on Katavius Street. That did not work out. Right. Shai Tuttle injured early. It didn't seem like he rounded in until maybe late in the season. And he's a guy that's an undrafted free agent. They've had a lot of undrafted free agents in the middle of that line to be able to augment, again, some of the veterans they had. The problem is a lot of the vets are gone. Yeah. So what do you see happening there? Man, I tell you, I think it would be a huge blow to lose a guy like Ryan Nielsen, because he has been. You've seen that defensive line up until this year really kind of be the mainstay of the defense.
Yeah, and I would have to say that the problems on the defensive line, which might have been the most underperforming unit on the team, Agreed. For the reasons you listed, I think that probably has very little to do with Ryan Nielsen, because we've seen him develop so many young defensive linemen over the years. He didn't forget how to coach defensive linemen. So that's going to be one of the most important things in the offseason, is not only sorting out the defensive staff, but on the defensive line, you have 5 unrestricted free agents among your top players, including 3 starters, if you consider Marcus Davenport a starter. Right. So that's 3 of your starters, 5 key players. They're not going to keep all of them. They probably don't want to keep all of them. But you can't replace 5 of your top defensive linemen in 1 year. Sure. That's just not realistic. So they have a lot of work to do there to figure out who they can keep and who's going to coach them and who's going to coordinate the defense. So there's a lot going on there, and that's the better unit between the offense and the defense coming out of last season. Right. But there's still a lot of uncertainty there.
Let's talk offense. Joe Lombardi was fired by the Chargers. He was their offensive coordinator, brought the Peyton Breeze offense there. What do you anticipate happening here? Will there be a wholesale change in terms of the philosophy on offense? Will they become more of a running offense to try to complement the defense? And you and I were talking before the show. I use maybe, again, Jim Mora as an example with Dennis Allen, where a guy that is more of a defensive-minded coach, maybe not aggressive in terms of offense, but again, a guy that would maybe like to run the ball, have a solid field goal kicker, and rely on his defense. Or do they stay with the present offensive structure and bring in someone that they knows how to run it? Maybe either let Carmichael go or move him back in the organization where he wanted to originally be. Remember, he didn't want to be the OC. Right. Allow him to be part of the game planning during the week, but not calling the plays on game day. What are your thoughts there?
Well, and that's why I think something will be done with Pete, who's been here from day one with Sean Payton and done a really good job. But as you pointed out, he was reluctant to be the OC. Offense did not perform well. I think probably he and Dennis Allen and Mickey Loomers are probably in agreement that it might be best to rearrange how that offense is coordinated. And so I could see him moving into a different role. Wouldn't surprise me at all. But then the fundamental decision you have to make is kind of what you laid out is, okay, do we stick with the system that Sean ran, Sean Payton, and get one of his other people to run it, or do we break from that and get somebody else and mold this into Dennis Allen's image of a team? Right. And I tend to think it's going to be the latter of the two, where they're going to make a change. And I understand the Jim Mora analogy, and I agree with it to an extent. Okay. I don't think Dennis Allen's as conservative as Jim Mora was. He also doesn't have as good a defense or as good a kicker as Jim Mora had. Maybe he would be. To that. So maybe he would be more conservative if he had the Dome Patrol and Morton Anderson. Right. But I think you could make a case for going with not necessarily a big difference in how you do the offense, but saying we don't have to just stick with exactly the way we did it before. Last year the theme was continuity, and that turned out to be a little bit overrated. Yes. Now it's kind of like we've had a year with the continuity. We saw what worked, what Dennis Allen's comfortable with, what maybe he's not so comfortable with, and now I think he has to step out of Peyton's shadow more so and say, okay, after a year I've learned this, and maybe the offense can be reshaped to better fit what I want it to be within the context of my whole team.
I agree with you. See, to me, if you're giving him a second year, and I want to get to that between you and I because we disagree on that, you have to give him an opportunity to bring his staff in and to put his stamp on the team. And if that means going away from an offense that was prolific at one time because they had a great quarterback, an incredible mind in terms of Sean Payton, so be it. Defensively, obviously, his stamp is on that. But again, getting someone that has the same vision that can do the day-to-day, obviously a thing, and freeing him up to be the head coach, the motivation, taking care of the locker room, etc. I do think the fair thing is allow him to go in the direction he needs to go, because again, to me, if he fails next year, I don't think you could run it back a third. I don't think you can run it back a third. Now, I did not believe that he should have been retained because I felt that he was retained because of continuity, and continuity failed. Injuries were a part of the reason why. Obviously, again, they stumbled, but again, you can't use injuries as an excuse. Look at the playoffs right now, and look at the teams that are in the playoffs. The injuries that a lot of those teams have suffered, they've been able to overcome that. You have a different take. I'd like you to be able to go ahead and give your take to the audience.
Okay. Now, one thing first, before we get to that, is Demario Davis said something interesting the day after the season ended.
Okay.
And basically what he said was, I'm paraphrasing here, but what he said was, maybe part of the reason they improved late in the year is he felt like Dennis Allen deferred too much to the past early in the season and was reluctant to be himself. And later in the season, he started getting more comfortable. When things weren't going well, he started getting more comfortable with changing how they did certain things.
On defense or as a whole?
As a whole,
okay.
But also on defense, but mainly as being head coach.
Okay.
He started getting more comfortable with being himself and not just trying to maintain continuity. And they did play better late in the season. So I think you're liable to see and likely to see that evolution continue in the offseason as he's figured out now, okay, I have to be less deferential to the past and put my own imprint on this operation.
Right.
Okay, now having said that, as far as him getting the second season, I totally understand your point of view, which is shared by a lot of people, which is it was a bad season. It should have been a better season. I don't think he's up to the task. This isn't that different from what happened in Oakland the last time.
Right.
We need to make a move. I understand that point of view. I don't totally agree with it, and I wrote about this at Crescent City Sports the day of the Carolina game.
That's right.
And my bottom line was, I wrote like 1,500 words, so if you want more detail, you can go back and read it.
I thought it was a great article, by the way.
Thank you. But the bottom line for me was, because of a lot of factors, one being the injuries, which you're right, it's not an excuse, but it is a factor because there was an inordinate number of key players.
It's a lot of starters.
A lot of starters, a lot of long-term absences.
Yes.
And you look at the way they got better at the end of the year. They took the ball away more often, not enough, but more often, gave it away less frequently, did much better with the penalties. Those were some of their Achilles heels. They got better. You know, I've seen Mike Ditka teams. I grew up watching the 70s Saints, okay?
Right.
I know what bad football teams that are poorly coached look like.
Right.
This was not a poorly coached team. The coaching had its shortcomings, no doubt about it. But I think the improvement over the course of the year leads me to my bottom line, which is that I don't know if Dennis Allen is the right guy to be the head coach of this team long term. But after one season, I don't know that he's not.
Okay.
I think he deserves a second season. I saw enough to suggest another season, changes to the offense, and hopefully a little better luck with injuries, we can make a better gauge of him after next season. And therefore, I think he deserves another season. Also, you're rolling the dice, okay? There aren't that many good head coaches in the NFL.
Right.
It's really, really hard. There aren't a lot of Sean Paytons out there. So you get rid of Dennis Allen, you go out and you go back and you interview somebody else's coordinator. I mean, who are you going to hire that you're going to be confident is going to be better? You need to be sure this guy can't do the job before you get rid of him, and I'm not sure he can't do the job.
Per Mike Triplett of New Orleans Football, Dan Rauscher will be the only assistant that will be let go on the offensive side of the ball. They're keeping everyone intact. They're not going to replace Pete Carmichael as offensive coordinator or any assistants beyond Rauscher. So again, they are done on the offensive side of the ball in terms of, again, moving off of assistants. So he's the only casualty at this point. Your reaction?
It surprises me a little bit, but it makes me wonder, because they have an opening on the offensive staff. So, you can rearrange responsibilities.
Yes.
Okay, Dan Rauscher, who I think is a good coach, came here as offensive line coach and was moved to tight ends coach / run game coordinator about 3 years ago. His replacement presumably is going to be a run game coordinator. He could possibly even be the play caller. And maybe Pete's role gets shifted a little bit. The fact that they're not going to get rid of Pete, they're maybe not going to change his title, doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to rearrange the offensive responsibilities vis-a-vis Pete Carmichael. Now that's just me speculating on something we just heard.
Just came out.
But I don't think that means they're going to be standing pat necessarily on offense.
But does it mean they stay with the same system now?
Presumably, it would have to be pretty much the same system.
I would think it would be the same system, which again I have no issue with. Okay, I think the system has worked. You probably need a better set of more receivers. The receiving, obviously, again with the injuries we saw, Michael Thomas, in my opinion, is done. In your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the restructuring in the contract was setting the stage for that.
Jarvis Landry, I think you can bring back. He was a $3 million guy this year. He didn't make a lot of the incentives because he was injured. Does he want to come back and stay in Louisiana, or does he want to try to go to a contender? That's up in the air. A healthy Jarvis Landry would have been a difference maker for this team.
Absolutely. And, we thought, in fact, I said that I didn't know if there was a position group in the NFL that had the potential to be more improved than the Saints wide receiving core.
True.
But they had Mike Thomas for 2 games, 3 games.
3 games, yeah.
They had Landry for maybe half a season, playing hurt most of that time. So it didn't work out that way. Now, Chris Olave was everything they had hoped.
And Shaheed obviously has emerged.
Yeah, and he emerged, and so it was improved noticeably, but it wasn't what it could have been if those first 2 guys had been healthy. So again, that's an area they have to restructure. They have to beef up during this off season. But the other thing is the offensive line.
Yes,
I mean, it doesn't matter who, and quarterback, there's so many things they have to address, but it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. It doesn't matter if Mike Thomas is there. It doesn't matter who's backing up Alvin Kamara. If you have a makeshift offensive line that can't open holes and protect the quarterback, you're not going to be a good offense no matter what.
Are they moving away from some of the guys they've had? For instance, a lot of people think Ruiz had a great season or a better season than they've had. I'm still not enamored. Andres Pete, I believe, will be a cap casualty, okay? Often injured, making too much money at this point. McCoy is, again, probably the guy, along with Ramczyk, who is, is a shoo-in to be able to be brought back. But this thought process of, again, moving Hurst inside. Hurst should be your guy, in my opinion, coming off the bench and playing multiple positions for you. You need a bona fide starting guard. And then the other thing is, again, now with Penning, with not 1 but 2 foot surgeries in his first season, is this going to be something where he'll be injury prone? Can he overcome that? He lost an entire season this year in terms of development because of the injury. So to me, offensive defensive lines, I know everybody talks about quarterback, they've got to upgrade those offensive defensive lines. That they put a lot of draft capital into it, but a lot of it hasn't worked out.
No question about it. And I think Dennis Allen saw Sean Payton's devotion to building both lines of scrimmage. I mean, you have to win in the NFL.
Jeff Ireland, that was part of why he was brought in.
And so I think that's definitely going to be a priority. Now, some of these things we can't answer. Nobody knows about Trevor Penning's health going forward. Now, he basically lost his rookie season because of the injuries. Maybe he's your starting left tackle for 17 games next year and on into the future, and this was an anomaly. but we don't know. That's a concern.
We do know that Ramczyk has been often injured, and again, it looks like he's wearing down, as one of the best right tackles in football.
Yeah, that's a concern. And you brought up Cesar Ruiz. Right. I think it's more. I would say more that he was improved than he was really good.
Right.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah. He took a step forward, but he has a long way to go.
A long way.
Eric
to go.
McCoy is fine at center.
I agree.
And I agree with you that the ideal thing is for James Hurst to be the utility guy who can swing everywhere.
And they've always had a really good utility guy on that line that can play multiple positions.
Right, and that's what you would prefer, but if you do release Andres Pete, and I think that's a real possibility because they have more work to do to get under the cap than any other team in the NFL.
Agreed.
So, but you can get a guard in the NFL without spending a ton of money.
No doubt.
So I think you could probably find a starting guard somewhere and allow Hurst to be the swing person. If that doesn't work out for whatever reason, then Hurst probably becomes your left guard if you get rid of Pete. So there are a lot of questions there on the offensive line that have to be
Landon
answered.
Young, who again is kind of a,
Landon Young, I think, has potential.
Me too.
He's a big guy. He's a strong guy. He's got some versatility. He's been hurt both.
He was all SEC at
season.
Kentucky. I mean, which is at Kentucky.
Yeah, that's really hard to do. When people look at SEC teams for all league teams, they don't look at Kentucky unless somebody gives them a compelling reason to look at them.
Which gives me a hope that this is a guy that can play on the NFL level and be more than just that backup.
Yeah, and Mark Stoops has built Kentucky into a different type of team than Kentucky has historically been. So there's reason to think he might be able to fit in somewhere along the line. So there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of uncertainty there. There are a lot of decisions to be made there. And that's something we're going to be tracking all the way till September.
Let's talk about Marcus Davenport. 2 number 1 picks, has not panned out. There's talk they'd like to bring him back at the right price. Same thing with David Onyemata, although I think Onyemata to me would be more of a priority than Davenport. Can they? I won't say double down. Can they triple down on Davenport?
I don't think so. I agree. Between the two, Onyemata would be my priority. I had a sense at the end of the season that he took a step back, and then I went back and I looked at the statistics, and he really didn't. He was very similar to what he was.
But it felt like it, didn't it?
It did kind of feel that way. But
I think a lot of it had to do with not having that big guy next to him.
But tackles, sacks, tackles for loss, these numbers were about the same. So
with the run game was where, again, they really were hurting.
Right. They need to address the tackle position.
Right.
But I think if you're looking at Onyemata versus Davenport, and like I said before, out of those 5 guys, they got to bring some of them back, but they can't bring all of them back. Onyemata would be above Davenport in my pecking order.
Right.
It looked like Davenport was coming around last year. What did he have? 9.5 sacks in 21?
Yeah, it did.
And he had half a sack. Last season. I don't know
when
how to
I saw him in the last game against Carolina, I looked at him and I said, he just looks fat, looks out of shape. Now maybe that's a byproduct of being injured most of the season, but he didn't have the burst. He never seemed to develop that second move. Okay, a lot of his sacks the year before were bull rushes. Okay, where again he just physically just pushed the tackle back and was able to make a play. A lot of it again was Jordan putting pressure from the other side, and then the quarterback escaping to his side. So again, you look at him, you look at Peyton Turner. That's 4 number 1 picks wrapped up in those 2 guys. Okay, and both guys coming from small schools. They had the measurables that they like, but again couldn't do it consistently on the field. The jury's still out on Peyton Turner right now, as we speak. The secondary. Looks like it's got some really good players there. The question is, if you're going to make some moves in the offseason, I don't think they're going to do this, is Marshawn Lattimore a guy that you're dangling out there to get picks? Now again, it's a big cap hit if you move off of him. Or is it a guy you say, look, he's the best player we got on that defensive backfield, and we're holding on to him?
Yeah, I would not trade him for draft picks. We saw the last 2 or 3 games. He came back, I think, for the last 3 games. You immediately saw what a huge difference he makes. He's somebody you rebuild around. You don't move him on to get assets to rebuild
Taylor,
with.
both the guys that can play in the NFL. You see that.
Yeah, they are.
Take a step back,
but you need a lot. You need a lot of DBs, especially the way Dennis Allen plays defense. So no. Now, if I could if I was putting together a package to acquire Lamar Jackson,
okay,
yeah, I would say goodbye to Marshawn Lattimore.
Right.
But he would have to be an asset you move in a blockbuster trade to get something historic.
Right.
I wouldn't unload him for draft picks. No,
How about the returning of Cam Jordan? I'm in favor of, unless he wants to move on to a contender.
Well, he said the day after the season, he said, "I'm going to be part of the Who Dat Nation as long as they'll keep me."
Well, then to me, that's
so. I don't think there's any doubt he wants to be back,
Right.
Even though in the back of his mind he's probably thinking,
Right.
"Boy, I'd like to get a ring."
Yeah, why not?
But he's under contract.
Ricky Jackson did it, right?
Ricky Jackson did, and I could see that same thing happening, but he sounded like a guy who wants to be here, and if I were the Saints, I would welcome him back with open arms.
Talk to me about Demario Davis and this linebacking core. Werner, obviously, again, when healthy's played well, and we saw the emergence of
Caden
Ellis this year.
And Ellis, I believe, is also an unrestricted free agent.
Yes. They're speculating 2 years, $10 million is where he's going to probably be. That's according to Sportric.
Well, he was a revelation when he got a chance to play. I mean, he's been hurt most of his. This is what his fourth year.
Right.
He's been hurt most of his career. They liked him. He had an outstanding training camp as a rookie, and then got hurt.
Right.
And kind of just muddled along after that with other injuries. And then this year he got the opportunity and he played really well.
Right.
And so I think he's somebody you want to bring back. Pete Werner is a very good young player. I think you definitely want to keep him back. Now, getting back to Demario Davis, that's a tough one. He's getting older.
There's no doubt. There were some plays where he was out of position. I think of the Tampa game with 2 touchdowns were on him. He was out of position.
This probably was not his best season with the Saints, although his others were so great.
Right.
That doesn't that doesn't mean a whole lot in itself. But he is older. He is making a lot of money. He is somebody you could trade to a team missing a
and
piece.
He's got 1 year left on his deal, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so. And so he's someone you can move and get some pieces that would help you rebuild.
Right.
But he's such an important person.
In terms of just his leadership, right?
His leadership. I mean, he was the Drew Brees of the defense, and he really became the Drew Brees of the team after Drew retired.
So can you afford to move him?
I don't know that you can. He's the heart and soul of that locker room.
Especially a team that's in flux like this right now. You need stability.
Right. If you were just looking at the stats, and you weren't looking at the person, you could move on from him a lot more easily.
Agree.
But I would have a difficult time not having Demario Davis retire as a Saint.
I would agree. I know my director's going crazy right now because we're running a little bit over time. But I want to ask you 2 questions about offense, and then I want to come back and talk Sean Payton. Quarterback. Is it a draft and retain an Andy Dalton as a bridge guy? Do they trade for a starter? What do you think happens at quarterback?
Well, I think what they have to do is they can't draft anybody who's going to start next year because they don't have a number 1 pick.
I agree.
Nobody who's ready to play is going to be available after that. I don't see. I've argued for giving Jameis Winston the shot that he earned before he got hurt. They didn't do that. He was unhappy about it. Dennis Allen apparently felt Andy Dalton gave him the better chance to win. And he was probably, I've said this before, he probably has a higher floor than Jameis and a lower ceiling. He's going to make fewer mistakes, but he's going to make fewer big plays. And that's the calculation they made. They thought that Andy gave them the better chance to win. I thought Jameis deserved to get the job back that he lost due to injury. But given the way that happened and the way Jameis reacted, I don't see why they would go to him now and say, you're our guy.
I never felt he was Dennis's guy to begin with. Dennis wanted
they went after Deshaun Watson.
Okay. I felt all along that Dennis game planned against him at Tampa all these years and didn't have the faith in him that Sean Payton had. And that when they had a chance to move off of him, especially after the injury, and then the 2 bad games after the injury, he didn't trust him again. And then when he went public, it was over.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you may be right about the Tampa thing. Real quick to wrap it up.
Sure.
I think Andy Dalton, who's also a free agent, but wants to be here. I think he's your fallback guy. You talk trade, you look at the free agent market, and you try and find an upgrade somewhere, and then Andy is plan B, and I think that gets resolved probably in mid-March.
The other part is they need a physical back. Is that a draft choice, or are they going into free agency and getting that?
Well, I think you look at that in free agency, but I don't think they're going to be able to spend a whole lot of money. But with Alvin Kamara here, nobody's going to come here who's capable of being an every down back. So, yeah, I think you try and get a complimentary player like Mark Ingram was, like Latavius Murray was.
Right.
So you try and get somebody you can afford. If not, then you get that in the draft.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest today is Les East of CrestCitySports.com and Saturday Down South. When we come back, we'll talk Sean Payton and the possibility of what type of compensation the Saints can get for Sean Payton. And then we'll get into some LSU, Tulane, and also the Pelicans, as well as college basketball. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll be right back.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Les East, CrestCitySports.com, Saturday Down South is our guest. All right, we were talking the break. I mentioned again, I don't know what the dynamics are going to be in terms of keeping Pete Carmichael. I don't know how you sell that to the fan base at this point. You were thinking about maybe again the replacement Dan Rauscher. But again, we talked about the offensive line coach, who again was a former coordinator and a former head coach.
Yeah, Doug Marrone. And I think because of the timing, whoever replaces Rauscher will have a prominent role in any restructuring of the staff.
Yes.
But Doug Marrone, I flash back to training camp, something he said that was interesting and applies now, whether he's the coordinator in name or whether he's just involved in
game planning,
in massaging the system.
Okay.
Now that we're past Breeze and Peyton, Marrone was there at the beginning when they made the system with Sean Payton, and he was coordinator at one point. And he said when he came back, they would have meetings and they would say they would have the quarterback that in this play with this formation, the quarterback does A, B, C, D, and E, and he has to go through these progressions, all this stuff. And he would ask, why do we doing all that? Why is it so complicated? And he said, well, Drew knew how to do it.
Right.
Yeah, well, Drew isn't here.
Right.
Okay, he's a population of one.
Right.
Okay, you're asking too much of anybody to run this thing the way Drew Brees ran it. So Marrone has the eyes of what it was at the beginning, and now he sees what it evolved into,
right,
which is gone past what anybody other than Drew Brees could do.
Right.
So I think he will be very useful in bringing it back to a manageable scale for mere mortals that aren't Drew Brees.
That's a great story and a great insight into, again, how this thing has evolved over years. Because we saw it, right? I mean, Brees, Brees made all the line calls. Okay, I mean, he did everything. Okay, and again, I mean, I said this so many times. The offensive line was good, but the offensive line was good in a lot of reasons because Brees was so good.
Right.
Setting up the line calls, getting the ball out quickly, understanding again who the hot read was, everything that he did. Again, because again, the offense was built for Brees by Brees and Peyton.
Yeah, and you go back to the first Carolina game, they couldn't block anybody.
No.
Because they couldn't figure out
who was,
Jameis wasn't up to speed, but they were still counting on him doing what Drew did.
Exactly.
And Eric McCoy also was responsible for a lot lot of that. So
that's a great point.
I think they need to tweak this system, and Doug Marrone will be very helpful in doing that.
I agree. All right, let's talk Peyton here. He's interviewed with the Texans. He's interviewed with Denver. He's got Carolina on Friday. Has the Arizona interview happened yet? No,
and I'm not sure that's going to happen, but it hasn't been scheduled yet.
It hasn't been scheduled yet. A lot of people thought LA Chargers, okay? A lot of people maybe thought Dallas. Those are out now, okay? They're bringing back their coaches. Some people think he may sit out another year. What's your take?
I think it's a coin toss. There's been a lot of speculation that, he wants a place where he can win right now, and he has a young quarterback that he can groom for the future.
Right.
And, that's what every coach wants. But those teams aren't looking for coaches because they have a playoff roster and a good young quarterback.
Yes.
Hence the LA Chargers. So every opportunity that's out there now is imperfect, clearly. So I think he's got to make a calculation. He's got to look at it and say, boy, none of these is exactly what I'm looking for, but there's no guarantee that next year is going to be any better.
Right.
And the difference between what Fox Sports is paying him and what one of those teams would pay him this year is going to be, $6, $8, $10 million?
There was a report he's asking for $25 million a year.
Okay, and what's Fox paying him?
Right.
5, maybe?
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
And he was making 9 with the Saints.
So that's a lot of money you're not going to get back if he doesn't coach this year. So he's got a lot of stuff he's got to weigh in there, but it would not surprise me at all if he says, no, it's just not right.
Okay.
I'm going to wait a year and see if something better comes along. But I don't know. I don't think he knows.
Right. Houston has the best package for the Saints, okay?
Sure.
The second overall pick, 12th overall pick in the first round. They've got the 33rd overall pick in the second round, which is a high second round pick. They got 2 third-round picks. They got, again, multiple first-round picks next year, and I believe the following year as well. Arizona's got the 3rd overall pick this year, the 35th pick in the second round. Denver has the 28th pick, which is really the 27th pick because of the Miami forfeit. And then, of course, they got 2 third-round picks, 68 and 69, and a 2024 first-round pick. Seems like Peyton's trying to manipulate the market here by saying the Saints are, that he talked to Mickey, it is a mid-first round to late first-round pick. I'm on the record, and we and I have discussed this. It starts at the Gruden deal. 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks in cash. Okay, that's where it starts. Now, Peyton doesn't want to give away all these first-round picks. Sure. He's going to be a head coach. But at the end of the day, it's the fiduciary duty of Loomis to get the absolute most he can for Peyton. What do you think happens?
Well, I give Sean a lot of credit for trying to manipulate the market. But I mean, that was laughable when he says, he states it as a matter of fact. Well, to say it would be a mid to low first-round pick. No, it's not. Nobody believes that.
Nobody's buying that.
I mean, nice try, but nobody's buying it. The best quote to come out of Mickey's news conference last week was to the effect that he's a really good friend of mine, but he's an important asset to this organization, and we have an obligation to maximize it.
Right.
A mid to late first-round pick is not maximizing
exactly.
it. Okay. So, from the Saints' point of view, Houston definitely is the most realistic partner.
He'd have total control at Houston. He can pick his own general manager. Right. Now the question is again that ownership group has fired 2 coaches in 2 years. They're not firing Peyton. after 2 years, but it is, as far as that goes.
But you don't know what kind of assurances he's going to have about structuring the front office and surrounding himself with his own people and running the whole show, which I'm sure he will.
Which he wants, because he had it here. Why would you walk away from it?
Absolutely. That's what he would want. So I could see that happening. But, there's an assumption out there, getting back to what I said earlier, that, Sean wants, something that's ready to roll right now. Well, that's not going to happen. What he's got to be looking at is this may well be the last job he ever takes. He's 59. He can coach for a while, but he wants to be there 5, 10, 12 years.
Super Bowl so he can get in the Hall of Fame.
Right. So he's looking at this as quite possibly his last job. So he's going to get a long-term lucrative contract. So he's saying, if it takes me 2 years to get this thing rolling, I don't mind waiting 2 years to build it if it's the right situation long-term. So the idea that Houston's down right now doesn't mean that's not going to be attractive to him. And I think that's his comments about the Texans the other day were to get that message out there, but it was also to drive up the cost from the other other organization. So he did that interview the other day. He had a checklist of things he wanted to accomplish.
And he knew Cowherd would go right into it, no doubt.
Yeah, and he went through it. Mission accomplished.
Carolina in the division. Man, I tell you what, if that's the team, you get a premium for Sean Payton.
Yeah, Carolina needs to have Houston's assets.
Right.
Because the Saints are going to say, we're not letting him go in the division unless you give us everything.
Right, exactly.
And I don't know
remember,
that
no players can be traded.
Right. That really complicates things. So I don't know what Carolina's draft pick situation is for the next 2 or 3 years, but I think it would have to cover multiple years.
And he's not going to want to give up number ones for a couple of years.
Right.
Okay, he's trying to build this team. So again, that's why I think Carolina really is the long shot.
And that's another factor in his mind is if I wait till next year, the compensation won't be as great because I'm closer to getting out of my contract. And so that may enable him to be a little more patient in waiting and saying, I don't have to gut my new team to get that
We
job.
say this, but if there's multiple teams out there next year that want him, the price can be driven up as well.
That'll drive it up also. So it's it's a complicated calculation for everyone, and I think Sean's going through all of this right now, and I don't think he's made up his mind yet.
Les, I said this on the radio show this week, and I think the Saints have to look at this as this asset as it's the number one pick in the NFL draft. It is the lottery pick in the NBA. You have to treat this asset like that. So if you're going to trade it, you have to get compensation akin to having the first overall pick in both the NBA or the NFL draft. That's what you have to look at this as. And anything less than that, I think you're shortchanging the organization.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And, I think you're right. You look at John Gruden, and there are a lot of similarities. John Gruden, Sean Payton, Mike Tomlin, Bill Belichick, John Harbaugh. Those are the 4 best NFL head coaches of this generation.
That's
Andy Reid.
And Andy Reid, agreed.
5 of them. Sean Payton's one of those. He's on Mount Rushmore for this generation. Okay? He's 59 years old. He can coach for more than a decade. He can win you multiple Super Bowls. You don't just give him away. You say, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity you have to hire him, so you have to give us what it's worth to us.
100% agree.
And so this is the most important negotiation maybe that Mickey Loomis has ever had.
There's no doubt. It absolutely is. You caught lightning in a bottle by pulling this assistant that, his claim to fame was he got the play calling duties taken away from him. And he turns into this incredible coach. Okay? Can you do that again? We'll see. But the assets that you get are what you're using to rebuild this team going forward. So you have to be able to again strike and get the maximum you can. Let's shift to the Pels. They look like a tired team last night, first of all, against Miami. They just look tired. Okay, again, it's starting to wear on this team, the backups having to play so many minutes in different roles right now. And you see that especially against the good teams. Miami won that game wire to wire last night. It wasn't even close. They're 26-19 now. They've dropped to 4th in the West, okay, behind Sacramento. They're 6 games back, still second in the Southwest behind Memphis. But Memphis won 11 straight. And I think, off the top of my head, Denver's won 10 of their last 11. Okay, 10 of their last 11. So they're on a streak now where the Pelicans are falling back. I've talked about this a lot on my radio show. Brandon Ingram needs to get on the court. Okay, he was cleared weeks ago medically. He's still not on the floor. Again, it was a really great article by Christian Clark this week, where he really went in and really did a deep dive into the games missed. 29 games, now 30 so far this season. 57 over the last 2 games, over the last 2 seasons. What are your thoughts here with Brandon Ingram in terms of getting back on the floor?
Well, the last time he played was Thanksgiving weekend.
Right.
Think about that.
Right. We're getting ready to go into Mardi Gras.
Now, the key is you don't want to bring him back too soon. And you're right, he's been cleared, and Christian did the deep dive. So you wonder why he's not out there sooner. What exactly is the risk?
Right.
And but then again, he's a very large person who runs up and down a hardwood floor
right.
against elite athletes,
right.
world-class athletes. So it's not something, even though you hear a toe.
But it was diagnosed as a bruised toe originally.
Yeah, a toe contusion. I think
right.
they tried to make it sound more serious. So that doesn't sound menacing.
No, but it could be a turf toe, which we know is menacing.
It can be.
Right.
It can be a problem. So you can't dismiss it as saying, well, he's just been out because of a toe. It's potentially a problem that can be exacerbated if he comes back too soon, and you can afford to play without him in December and January.
Right.
You can't afford to play without him in April and May.
I agree, but this is such a tough back end of this schedule in January, and again, you're slipping here.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Zion will be reevaluated next Wednesday. Right. If he comes back, that helps, but the problem has been that this now looks like a guy that doesn't, and look, he's got the reputation. I don't play unless I'm 100%.
Yeah.
And you can't have that with one of your superstars.
Yeah, well, somebody close to the team told me a story, a couple of weeks ago, like, if you're not going to play till you're 100%, then you're out for the rest of the year.
Right.
Because nobody's going to be 100%
Never.
Until next year. So now Zion, I don't think is coming back next week. They said he'd be reevaluated after 3 weeks.
Right.
So we'll have an update next week. My guess would be that the update will be that he's going to enter a new phase in his rehabilitation, and hopefully he'll be back soon.
Right.
I wouldn't expect them to just come back and say he's ready to go, but we'll see. Maybe he is. Herb Jones hopefully is back here in the next few games. I think Ingram is somewhere in between there.
Right.
We keep hearing he's getting close, he's making progress. He's been out there shooting at practice and pregame for a couple of weeks now, off and on. So, I would expect him to be back soon. If they get all those guys back here in the near future,
they're going to make a run.
They're going to make a run. If they're top 4 and they're healthy come April, then they have as good a shot as anybody.
Agree. The problem is this looks like it is a trend with him. Okay, that's the issue. And can you rely on him? Especially having a guy that you know is going to be often injured in Zion. That other superstar's got to be a guy that you can rely on, game in, game out.
Yeah.
And you haven't been able to, and that's the issue.
Well, that's a legitimate question.
Let's go into Tulane quickly because I want to get to Walker Howard. We may not have enough time for college basketball today. Swoboda is still on the staff, but yet again has been replaced by tight end coach Slade Nagel as the offensive coordinator. Chris Hampton is leaving for Oregon to become the co-defensive coordinator and defensive back coach. Lance Guidry of Marshall, who had the 8th best defense in the nation last year, has been brought in. Both him and Nagel are previously on the staff of McNeese, and both McNeese grads. Your thoughts about this change, and can you make rhyme or reason what's happened with Swoboda?
No, I don't really understand what happened there because the offense and the defense were both so good this past season. So I don't know what happened there. Willie Fritz has had a fair amount of turnover on his staff since he's been here.
Right.
He's, I think, mostly done a good job of replacing guys. Not every hire has worked out.
Right.
But he's also, if you look at the way his offense has evolved from what he had at Georgia Southern to where it is now, he seems willing to make changes to the staff and make changes to his own system when it's necessary. So I give him the benefit of the doubt with the changes he's chosen to make and the one he had to make at DC. Marshall had a very good defense last year, so that looks like a good hire.
And he's a Louisiana guy who can recruit Louisiana.
That'll help with recruiting.
Right. Both guys can.
So I think it makes sense. And, the whole thing that Fritz has talked about since he's been there and has mostly accomplished is sustainable success. And this is what you have to do. You win the Cotton Bowl, you're going to lose people.
You're going to lose it, and
you have to replace them with good people. So I think it's been mostly seamless to this point. We'll find out next season how good it was.
Walker Howard to Ole Miss, your thoughts?
That surprised me. I always thought he would be more patient than a lot of guys because his dad played at LSU, Jamie Howard. He grew up in Lafayette, played high school ball in Lafayette, and I'm sure it's been a lifelong dream to be the LSU quarterback in Tiger Stadium. So it surprised me a little bit when it happened, but Jaden Daniels is coming back. He's going to be the starter next year. Garrett Nussmeier looked a lot better in the SEC championship game and in the bowl game than he did in that game against Southern where he made some bad decisions. And so I think he saw the handwriting on the wall that, especially if Nussmeier stays, and it looks like that, he may have to wait 2 or 3 more years to get his shot. There's a 4-star recruit coming in. So,
and you got Ricky Collins as a 4-star that's in this year.
Ricky Collins. So I think he's looking at it and saying, I probably have a better chance to compete for playing time, if not in 23 and 24 at Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin is going to develop me as a quarterback.
See, that's what I thought more than anything else.
I understand.
He went to a quarterback guru.
Yeah, absolutely. Any quarterback in the country would love to play for Lane Kiffin. So I understand why he did it. It just, I felt like the ties to LSU were so strong.
Me too.
That it might not happen, but I totally understand why it happened.
Well, and look, I've said this before. You and I talked about this on the radio show. The portal swings both ways. So again, first of all, you can't be afraid of competition, because there's always a guy coming to take your job. Okay, young guy was a kid out of high school or somebody's transferring now. But the way the rules are, again, that every year, well, actually you're re-recruiting your players every day. Okay, but every year somebody's coming in to take your job. And so this is not, it's a surprise that it happened so soon. But again, when you look at the big picture, a lot of people thought TCU was the place because he didn't want to play against the Tigers. I always thought he was going to be in the SEC. I thought he was going to Alabama. But I can see it now, why going to Ole Miss, to be with Lane Kiffin, to be developed for not now, but for the pros.
And Lane Kiffin was at the forefront of utilizing the portal when it first opened last year. And TCU has done a great job of getting people through the portal. But yeah, I think being in the SEC, he's going to get to play in Tiger Stadium finally at some point. And Ole Miss, LSU. But yeah, I agree with you. The biggest selling point is playing for Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's one of the reasons why. Wish we could have got to college basketball. Your alma mater's tearing it up again, Loyola.
How about that?
Amazing. Number 22.
Continuity sometimes works.
Well, actually, there's no continuity there. They lost their players and their coaches.
Lack of continuity sometimes works.
Yeah. So, but again, they're still rolling. Tulane again with a big loss to Houston. But again, I love what happened at Delvin the other night. And of course, LSU struggled 5 in a row. They've lost now. Big game with tonight for UNO in the South and for them. So we'll see how that goes going forward. Les, thanks as always. Always appreciate your time on both the radio and TV shows.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Les, he's a accomplished author and, of course, writer for both Saturday Down South and CrescentCitySports.com. All right, let me do this. Thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate you guys checking out the program. So many ways to catch our program now. I say it every week. I'm so blessed with the rebroadcast of our shows. There's a QR code on your screen right now. Take you to my website or the WLAE-TV YouTube page. Hey, just pick the time you want, set your DVR, and of course you'll be able to catch Inside New Orleans Sports each and every week. Catch me on the radio, 4 to 6, weekdays, 106.1 FM, Nash Icon, iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, our digital platforms, ericasher.com, and Nash1061.com on the World Wide Web. Our podcast is everywhere. Anchor's our home base. Search Inside New Orleans Show with Eric Asher for the podcast. And the podcast is up every single day after the program. program ends. Special thanks to our underwriters who make this show possible. Please support our underwriters and, of course, the WLAE production staff, including Rod Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Raffia, Alex Chacon, and the best director in the business, William Hill. For Les East, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.